I'm not actually convinced that Sean Wang made a movie. I think what actually happened is he learned the secret to time travel, went back in time to the mid-2000s, and just stuck a camcorder in front of my friends' faces and followed us around for a couple of weeks. That's how much Didi feels like a pristine time capsule of a very specific time, of a very specific place, of a very specific person. And that person, well, it's me. For those of you who don't know, I grew up as an Asian American in the same time period in the same area that this movie was filmed. A lot of the scenes used in this film are all places within 100 miles of where I grew up. Hell, I even recognize some of the sets that were used in the movie. So it's clear to me that this film really accurately captures this very specific moment in time, but how does it stack up as a movie? Well, that's what I'd like to talk about in this video, so stay tuned, I'll share my thoughts. Didi is a 2024 film directed by Sean Wang, and it's his directorial debut. It actually won the Special Jury Prize and Audience Award at the Sundance Film Festival earlier this year. It follows the story of Chris, a 13-year-old in the summer before he starts high school, and it has all the kind of typical drama of a 13-year-old. There's a love interest, there's a theme around fitting in with your friends, there's getting along with his mom and his older sister, and just in general trying to find his own identity. So, it's a coming-of-age film, which at this point are kind of a dime a dozen, but I think it stands out in two unique ways. The first thing that this film does differently is that it captures a very specific time period with a lot of accuracy. I personally get kind of annoyed when I see movies that depict high schoolers that don't actually act like high schoolers. This film, on the other hand, I think depicts it perfectly. These kids are on MySpace, the early days of Facebook. You have scenes where they're kind of debating which emoji to use to text your crush. There's a scene where Chris kind of sets his own custom ringtone on his flip phone and then he hopes that he gets a phone call so that he can show it off. Which, by the way, how come we can't do that anymore? Come on, Apple. I want to play the lowest possible quality version of 2000 pop on my Motorola Razr. So because of this, a lot of the dialogue and some of the acting, it doesn't have some of the same polished, rounded out edges that some of these more highly produced films have. It's really messy at times, but I think that's also what gives it its charm and makes it more real. I like that it includes all of the adolescent awkwardness and cringe of that period of your life, but it's also combined with this emerging pre-smartphone digital age. Because it's so realistic though, it is a film that moves at the pace of life. Conflicts that come up are always kind of small in nature and they get resolved fairly quickly. On one hand, it's nice that people actually act like people and we don't have contrivances for why these crazy conflicts occur. But on the other hand, it never does feel like the stakes are particularly high. If Everything Everywhere All at Once was this maximalist, absurd film that was about not only the fate of the universe, but the fate of all multiverses, this film is much more grounded, realistic, and minimalist, even though the two of them kind of portray very similar things under the surface. So this kind of brings me to my second point, which is how it takes a unique spin on the coming-of-age story. So most kids that are Chris's age are already trying to find some sense of self-identity. It's already hard enough at that age. But I think Asian Americans have had this notion that we are permanently the outsider, too foreign to fit in even if we were born here just like everyone else. Chris's legal name is Wang, and there are various scenes where people have trouble pronouncing his name, and there are just little things here and there that always kind of remind Chris that he's an outsider. So because of this, there's kind of this extra layer of distance that Chris has with everyone else. I'll admit, some of these subtle moments won't necessarily be relatable for everyone watching this film if it's not something that you've gone through personally. But I appreciate that this film is not trying to be everything for everyone all at once. You see what I did there? Yeah? No? It does get a little heavy-handed at times. Some of the characters feel like they exist to serve certain plot points, and after they're given their screen time and they've made the point, they kind of leave the film and aren't really fully fleshed out as characters. I would have loved to see more interactions between Chris's group of dingus friends. Maybe it's just because they remind me of my own friend group growing up, but their middle school level interactions are so funny and nostalgic to me. I love it. That being said, there is one character that does become fully fleshed out, and their relationship is the center of this film, and that's his mom, who in my opinion is the standout actress here. Joan Chen, she's had many prominent roles in China and has garnered some Academy Award attention. She does a really good job of nailing this idea of how Asian American parents show affection. She does a lot of non-verbal signs of affection, and I think she nails that perfectly. It's all body language, facial expressions, very subtle things like the way that she looks at her son in the film. You really believe that she deeply cares about him. There are little acts of service, things like, "Hey Chris, have you eaten today?" that I think a lot of Asian Americans can find familiarity to with their own parents. I also do want to give a special shout out to the grandma in this film. I think a little fun fact is it's actually Sean Wang's real life grandma who made a cameo in this film. I think this film has a lot of intersections with the Asian American experience, and I think we can look at a lot of these intersections through Chris's hobby as a YouTuber. And I really love this decision within the film. I think it serves like 3 different purposes. The first one is one of Chris's main struggles in this movie is in self-expression, finding out who he really is, and his YouTube channel is a way to do self-expression. There's a certain scene later on in the film where he deletes some of his old YouTube videos, and it's such a heartbreaking scene because it feels like he's deleting a little bit of himself. If only he had been born a little bit later and learned about the private and unlisted videos feature on YouTube. The second reason why I think this YouTuber decision makes sense is that it highlights his relationship to his mom. You know, for most of the film, he tries to separate himself from his cultural identity and his parents. He thinks that him and his mom are nothing alike, but they're actually really similar in more ways than one. His mom is also an artist. And now, I understand that filming a video of your friend getting kicked in the nuts, it's not exactly the height of artistic expression. It's still something. I think this feeling of having a connection to his mother, it's expressed through other ways in the film that I won't spoil, but suffice to say, I think some of the trauma that Chris receives from his mother's treatment, we can see that his mother also receives. It's this idea of intergenerational trauma that I hope people will leave this film with a better understanding and appreciation for the challenges that this older generation of Asian American immigrants had to deal with, having to leave their homes and start a new life. I hope at the end of the day people will understand that this generation, they tried their best given the skills that they had at the time. I think that's all you can really ask for, and hopefully we'll do a little bit better now that we have better tools than they had. Finally, I think Chris being a YouTuber kind of highlights this media landscape of Asian Americans at the time. Growing up, we really didn't have representation in traditional media. TV shows and movies typically casted stereotypical depictions of Asians, and that's if we were depicted at all. So one of our main sources of representation was in YouTube, this do-it-yourself creator economy, and it was the starting point for many people to begin to believe that they themselves could produce their own creative works and have an audience without needing permission from Hollywood. Undoubtedly, some of these early creators probably inspired Sean Wang, who then went on to create, this full-length feature film. Didi is a messy film that moves at the pace of life, but I think that's part of the charm, and it's the first film that I've ever seen that has tackled growing up as an Asian American in such a poignant way. Some of these films, like Everything Everywhere All at Once and Didi, are films that I never thought would get made in my lifetime. Stories of my life told through people who had lived through the same thing. As an Asian American, it's very validating, and if you're someone who can connect to this kind of story, or someone who wants to send a message to Hollywood that we want to see more of these stories, I strongly encourage you to watch this film while it's still in theaters and support the film. Didi is out now on limited release, and it'll be receiving a wider theatrical release on August 16th. I give this film a 9 out of 10. If you got the chance to catch this movie, let me know what you thought about in the comments, and please subscribe if you want to see more movie reviews like this.